Now, back in the day when we only had the original Star Wars trilogy and all we knew of the Clone Wars was what Obi-Wan said to Luke in A New Hope, which honestly was nothing beyond the fact that something called the Clone Wars had happened, and that apparently he, as a Jedi, was a general in them. Anyway, back then when that's all we knew about the Clone Wars, I had a very, very different image in my head of what they were. I thought for sure they involved the Jedi protecting the galaxy from some sort of endless army of monstrous mutant clones that just kept reproducing or cloning themselves over and over, and they were trying to take over everything because, well, because they were evil clones. Never once in all the times I wondered about it did it ever cross my mind that maybe the clones, whatever they actually ended up being, might be on the side of the Jedi, and that they'd fight together to stop something else. And not once in my wildest of dreams could I have ever imagined that one day we'd get 7 seasons of an animated show about those briefly mentioned Clone Wars, and that it would become, arguably, some of the best Star Wars anywhere ever, thanks in large part to the clones, who my young brain had once thought would be monstrosities of some kind. However, they turned out to be anything but that, even though, rather unfortunately, due of course to time constraints, the prequel films that introduced us to the clones never really gave us any insight into them, what they were all about, or who they really were. If anyone at all, actually, if anything more than just sort of mindless drones bred for war, which they are mainly portrayed as in those films, other than with a few well-placed lines of dialogue in Revenge of the Sith from Cody to Obi-Wan and vice versa, hinting at or implying some type of rapport or even a friendship between the two. And it would later turn out to be this hinted at bond between Jedi and clone that would be one of the main things explored by the Clone Wars animated series, and in my opinion, would also turn out to be one of, if not the best aspects of the show. Because one thing I couldn't figure out, or that didn't make much sense to me before that show anyway, was how did the Jedi justify using the clone army? How were they okay with using clones designed and bred for war, clones that had no other choice but to fight? You'd almost think the Jedi would be the ones more prone to using a droid army, and the Separatists would be using clones, not that either side had a choice in the matter of what they were using to fight the war. Which is also maybe how the Jedi justified it at first, that they had no other choice but to use the clone army, that they had to use whatever was available to them in the moment to fight for the Republic, to do whatever they had to do to stop the Separatists, which I suppose you can understand. But you still would think it would conflict with some of their deepest core beliefs and principles, that at some point the Jedi or the Council would have a serious discussion about what they were doing, if it was acceptable or not, if using clones created only for war and allowing them to continue to be created, mind you, is something they should support, even if it's in the name of safeguarding the Republic, or if they should be exploring other alternatives, even if it might mean eventual defeat. Which kind of leads to an interesting question for the Jedi, I think, which is, what price is too high of a price to pay for victory? At what point do you have to become the very thing you swore to destroy in order to win? And can you even consider it a victory if you had to essentially sell your soul to achieve it? And I do think perhaps this was all part of Palpatine's master plan, that he wanted to put the Jedi in this impossible situation of having to use a clone army to try and save the Republic from the Separatists. Because I fully believe the most fundamental belief or the core principle or tenet of the Jedi Order is to be selfless. And you can certainly argue there is or could be nothing more selfish than to rob others of choice, especially for your own benefit, or to expect people to live or behave or believe or act a certain way. Because one of the main things the Jedi usually try to do is to allow people to live as they see fit, to see to it that they have choice when it comes to their own life. They essentially safeguard free will, you could even say, as opposed to the Sith who only want to rule everything and everyone and bend it to their own will and make things for everyone how they think they should be, which again is about the most selfish thing you can do, to force people to be who or what you think they should be, which could certainly lead to an interesting real-world discussion, but let's not go there. Because this also leads us right back to the question of, how do the Jedi justify using the clone army? How do they justify taking away their free will or their choice to either fight or not fight, even though most clones do choose to fight, but of course they're bred to want to fight? And to begin to find the answer to that, I think we have to go all the way back to the very first episode of the Clone Wars, to one of my favorite scenes in the entire series, which is when Yoda finds himself with 3 clones who have all but given up, who think their situation is currently hopeless. And so what Yoda does is ask them to remove their helmets so he can see their faces, to which one of them responds that there isn't much to see, that they all have the exact same face. But Yoda says he sees them all differently in the Force. He sees them as individuals and that, like all living things, they are part of the Force as well. He then goes on to call each of them by name and basically tells them what's unique about each and every one of them. And I found this to be such a powerful scene and one that set the tone for the entire series, because it shows us that the Jedi, or at least most of the Jedi, there were some exceptions, and I'm mainly looking at you, Pong Krell, it showed us that most of the Jedi genuinely cared and got to know the clones who served under them. But not only that, but I think the clones learned a great deal from the Jedi as well. This was a mutually beneficial exchange going on here. Because I certainly don't think the Jedi just saw themselves as the generals or commanding officers of the clones. They also saw themselves as friend, teacher, and in some ways even caretaker. I think in many ways the clones learned how to become human from the Jedi, which is maybe a bit ironic since many think the Jedi deny themselves some of the things that we here in the modern real world find essential to being human or living a human-like life. But that's a whole discussion for another time. And you could even say, intentionally, I think, the Jedi were subtly teaching the clones how to live once the war was over, preparing them for a life without the thing they were created to do. And there are a couple great lines from Rex in Season 7 as the war is winding down and literally right before Order 66 happens, where he's talking to Ahsoka and she's lamenting how her whole time as a Padawan was spent being a soldier, and he says in response, "I've known no other way." Gives all us clones a mixed feeling about the war. Many people wish it never happened, but without it, we clones wouldn't exist. And this is so great for multiple reasons, because it's really one of the only times where we hear the clones truly contemplate their own existence, where they seem to be aware or they ponder the sort of complexity around their existence. Should they be happy to be alive? Because the only reason they are alive is because of a galaxy-sweeping war that took place and cost countless lives. Though, of course, they're not at fault for the start of the war. And yet, it's still a terrible reason to exist. And so far, that existence has been nothing but training for and then fighting the war itself. But now here is Rex, along with all his brothers apparently, since he says us or we. The war is almost over, and they're asking a truly profound question about their own existence. One that, again, probably comes, thanks in large part, to the way they've been treated by the Jedi, that they did treat them as individuals, and that they did learn from them that they are, or can be, much more than just clones meant to fight a war. And along with this, you really get the sense that Rex, and likely the other clones as well, want to be more, that they don't want to just be soldiers anymore, that they don't want to fight forever, that they want a purpose beyond that. And we have seen, thanks to the clone trooper Cut, who became a farmer, that they are certainly capable of being more, of essentially being just normal, everyday people who can live in peace and even raise a family. The other reason then those words from Rex about the contradiction behind their existence are so great and powerful in a very tragic sort of way is the timing of it all, that he says them shortly before Order 66, that for 7 seasons the show has built to this moment where the clones, again thanks to the Jedi, have become so much more than what they were or what they were designed or created to be, and where the war is about to end, and where they're likely going to be allowed to go and live out their life in peace. I would hope and imagine the Jedi would see to that happening, but then Order 66 comes. And like a light switch flipping, everything they once were, everything they were becoming or had become or were about to become, is taken away from them in an instant. But not only that, but they turn on and kill the ones who had helped them become more than just the soldiers they were growing tired of being. And as we've seen now in the Bad Batch, the chips are not something that wear off after a certain amount of time. They persist and continue to control them well after. Which is maybe both a blessing and a curse. A curse that they have become mindless soldiers after how far they'd come towards being something far more, and right before the war was ending where they would become something far greater. But a blessing that maybe they don't have to try and somehow cope with the betrayal of the Jedi. Not that it was in any way their fault, though I'm sure if somehow given the choice, they would all take the pain of what they had done over the mindlessness of being a soldier. Again, that's thanks to the Jedi teaching them that they were human. And part of being human is the pain of loss, which is also a reminder of what you once had. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. This was maybe a little different than my normal or usual videos, but if you enjoyed it, do let me know in the comments below and I'll do more like it in the future. Also, if you're old enough to remember just the days of the original trilogy, I'm curious to know what you thought the Clone Wars were, or if you never really gave it much thought at all. Either way, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.